Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. Good morning. Welcome to Still Growing Grace. We are live here on Wednesday morning. And for those that do chime in live, make sure you comment and say hello. Tell me where you're watching from. And I think you're going to really enjoy today. So the conversations we've had most of the time, we're at episode 179, and most of them have been about theology, revisiting a verse in scripture, how can it mean that, or we've heard stories, or we've hit a major topic. It's been really good, but I don't recall a time we talked about joy. Just wait a minute, what about enjoying the journey? Like, really, sometimes we get so bogged down with some deep theological topics, or that we forget there's still joy in living and having fun. I don't know if you catch this, but you know, between Richard and Bill and I, we kind of like to have fun. we banter back and forth. Normal's boring, and I think that's kind of what makes this program kind of fun. And even the guests I will be interviewing, I've got a list of folks I'm trying to reach out to, but not just reach out to. I'm trying to find time to do this. I am planning to do some holiday time, so that probably the next 2 weeks I may or may not be joining. And if I do a Still Growing Grace, it's a popping in, saying hello from the place I'm having vacation. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's all. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Let's dig right in. This is Richard and Bill and I chatting through the joy of the journey. So here we go. Let's take this in. I'll be watching live with you, so I'm hearing this for the first time since it was recorded. So here we go. Here we go. All right. Welcome to Still Growing Grace, folks. This is going to be more fun, candid chat. We hadn't had a chance to connect with Bill and Richard in a while, and so I miss you guys. So I thought I want to connect and see how it's going. What's going on with you guys? How's life? And I think even those that watch the program, it helps to see some of our personal stuff too, to keep things real. Otherwise, how do you connect? Instead of, oh, that person over there who teaches theology, right? So I thought, hey, let's connect. And for those watching, we're honestly just catching up with each other live with you. So inviting you into the conversation and see where this goes. So Bill, you were told that you have to go first because Richard ordained it. How's it going, man? What's going on? Remind us where you are and all that.
Very, very, very full. It's just, I'll tell you, the month of May was absolute just fire hose for our family. Work is at an all-time high, but then you add into that, my wife and I had our anniversary trip at the beginning of the month, and that rolled straight into my daughter's high school graduation, which rolled straight into our annual trip to MomoCon. I think you guys may have seen some of the pictures where I was Walter White from Breaking Bad.
Yep, I noticed.
And it was Jesse, and we walked around, and we must have taken like 300 pictures with strangers who wanted us that pictures with them. Yeah, and so coming off that this past weekend for 4 days, obviously Memorial Day weekend for Americans. So it's just been, and so we're just this week's catch up. And it's been psychotic this week, just trying to catch up. So I finally, we're entering the weekend again, so hopefully it'll calm down slightly coming forward here. But it's been nutso, and you know, but all in all, everybody's healthy. People got the con crud, is what they call it. If you've ever been to one of those like conventions where everybody dresses up, everybody gets like a head cold afterwards. So my daughter and son got the head cold, but other than that, everybody's good, and Christina's business is doing well, so we're hanging in there, white knuckling it.
Yeah, if you like to see any furniture restoration type projects, his wife really does do a good job on stuff, explains stuff. I get online and heckle her when I can, but it's really neat learning for those that are into that stuff. Richard, what's going on with you, man? Oh wait, you look a little bit too relaxed.
Well, I've been on vacation all week. This is the first vacation I've taken in over a year. So
Wow.
was in Nashville until yesterday. And then today I'm bringing it in for a landing before I have to go back to work Monday. But I'm
Wow.
been very busy at work, obviously, so this was well needed. And sort of scouting out Nashville a little bit next week for my son's bachelor party weekend. He's got four brothers, so the four brothers and I think one or two of his buddies are going to Nashville for the weekend. So and
Okay.
then he's married in July.
That's
So
amazing.
it is amazing, but it's going to be a wonderful thing. I absolutely love his fiance, and they are attached at the hip.
That's
So,
awesome.
and actually, her bachelorette party is in the same city. So it may or may not be next weekend. I'm thinking it's next week. I'm not sure about that, but they can't even bear to be apart during their bachelor and bachelorette parties.
There's a lot going on then in the background in your schedule then. That's a lot.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
That's cool.
How
My
about you,
end,
Mike?
yeah, it's the common phrase is, oh, it's so busy, but that's just because I juggle three different jobs. So I pastor church, and I'm a funeral home officiant and a wedding officiant, and then I work in long-term care as a chaplain. So when you start to juggle those, it, there's these slots. Oh, and then I have a family, and my one son's back home, my other one's moving back home in the next 2 weeks,
Yep.
because apartments are really expensive here. I don't know if you have a housing crisis where you are, but here in
Oh, we
Ontario
do.
it's nasty. But that's going on, and then my wife and I are planning to go on a vacation shortly, and I need it. I took a week off like a couple weeks back, but just to do nothing, and I needed that, but it wasn't enough. So I'm really looking forward to just going with Lori and just spend time without an agenda. That's gonna be weird. So,
Weird.
well, I like to plan. I like to know what's going on if I can. Some people got mad at me for wanting to be too organized and too planned, but in those circumstances, I was always with other people and making sure everybody else's needs are there. And that's why the planning was so important. But here it's just she and I do what we want. So we're going to be near the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, right on a cottage right on the ocean in Nova Scotia.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Looking forward to that. So we'll show off later when we get back. But yeah, I think it's a needed getaway. Because I was talking to a couple other people that are doing vacation things, and it's almost like this year's a strange year. We thought we got a vacation from COVID, from the 3 years of crazy intensity, but that was nothing. That tension and stress is still built up and needs to be released still.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you release your butt cheeks of stress and go, and then you realize, oh man, am I tired? And that's what it feels like. So yeah, it's just a lot going on. You think your kids are getting older and the problems will be less. So
Yeah, Richard, you probably have us both beaten that world. So
I don't know, but it's an interesting time. And then summer's here, and now everybody's getting busy, especially you with your Bill, with your family stuff and the kids' graduation stuff. That's really cool. It's fun to see. But then how do you manage that and your job and all these other categories? Like, they just increase suddenly when the weather gets better. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's all true. And I know we were going to maybe talk about it, but I think one of the key things is not losing your joy. I know we were kind of discussing that right before.
Yep.
And what is joy? And then I know I've been through several major life changes. Listen, I think I got a coworker who lost his wife unexpectedly 5 or 6 months ago. I mean, you just see hardship. I have another coworker years ago lost a child unexpectedly, and you have friends and you have family. My aunt, her husband just got diagnosed with kidney cancer, and he's been given weeks. And the reality is, if we allow the shadows of life and these pressures to just overwhelm us. It's easy for joy to just disappear. And I think joy is different than just the raw emotion of happiness.
Oh, totally different.
All right. And so, and I know, several years ago, Christina went through a crisis with a health crisis with her brain aneurysm. And, many people actually stopped me and are like, how are you managing this? And the reality is, I lost my dad 7 months ago. I think that my joy just isn't sourced from those places. And I've always, and maybe I don't think everybody's been as organic with it as I am. And maybe it's just because I was blessed to know Jesus at an early age, and not religious Jesus.
Yep, real Jesus.
Right. And, I've always felt secure in being loved by something even bigger than my parents. And when you have that level of confidence, well, not in yourself. In fact, I think that's one of the keys is when we place confidence in ourselves or even in others, you're sure to be let down. And, even in your body, in your mind, my dad was one of the smartest men I've ever met. If I put my confidence in my intelligence or my perception of strength or any of those things, at some point, they're bound to fail me. But if my confidence is ultimately placed in something that, I believe to be completely unbreakable, completely omnipotent in that regard, then I don't have to have worry because I'm sourced from a perspective of hope that everything's going to be reconciled and work together for good. And I know that's cliche on some religious levels, but I think there is a fundamental truth there that allows us to approach this world optimistically. And that's seemingly a rare trait. Even inside of circles we run in, people started off real happy and gracious, but then they become negative and just everything's pessimistic. And I don't want to be known for that. So yeah. I'll leave it for there. And I think the three of us kind of share some of that mentality, and maybe that's why we connect so well together.
Joy is a good question or a good topic, because a pattern that I have been witnessing over the last number of years is when people start to discover some pretty cool things about Jesus that they weren't told about, they're pretty excited. Yeah. But then they get sucked into conversations with the overthinkers and the over questioners, and everything gets turned into a negative thing, and they're no fun to be around anymore. They're always look at the negative thing. Their message is about the differences, not about the love of Christ. Like when you start to see certain people or teachers begin to focus on what everybody else is saying wrong or why they're more right, it's like, what you do, you just change ditches. The joy of the Lord is our strength is a whole different thing than what I was taught. And if we know and rest in the peace of Christ, which I think is the fuel for the joy,
it even said before the joy set before him, he endured the cross, right? It's like when you just meditate on that, well, it'll rock your world.
Yeah. I don't want to be a joy boy that's fake smiles. I want to be a person who enjoys Jesus and people and all the exciting things Jesus has created in others, all the different personalities, which sometimes takes work to get used to. But the lens, the perspective is so important. I don't know if you've bumped into any of that, Richard. Have you experienced any of this joy confusion, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, love, the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, long suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. That's the fruit of the Spirit. And if we don't have that fruit, and you don't go outward in, you can't fake it. And I think some people may fake their fruit, may fake joy, but things like sarcasm, or I'm a big listen. I'm quite capable of being sarcastic at the drop of a hat, but I don't believe sarcasm is something you should abide in or live in.
It's not a spiritual gift.
I'd call it cynicism.
Yeah.
Sarcasm, and it's semantics, but sarcasm can be just humorous. But when sarcasm turns into a mentality, which is cynicism,
Yes.
then that's that spin that just sucks joy, right?
Well, and I would never, but knowing you as I do, I would never classify you that way. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean,
No.
no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. And I think that cynicism, particularly if we're talking about deconstructionists, that it's so easy. It's so easy. It's too easy to sit there and just criticize, lambaste, tear something down. And I always look about it. What are you breathing in? If you can be underwater and come up every now and then for air, but you're still underwater and you can't breathe. I don't think you can really breathe while you're in cynicism. You can come up every now and then, but I'd rather be up above. I'd rather be in the oxygen. And if I have to at some point be negative, or maybe necessarily try to maybe point out something, I want it to be just me going in the water for for a few seconds and then coming back. I want my environment, my natural environment, to be.
There's a place to be. There's a place to be critical in a healthy manner, right? But
and a safe and an environment. The environment matters too.
In the right environment. I think there has to be discretion. There has to be wisdom. We got to listen to Spirit to do those things. And even Jesus outlines kind of certain parameters that are healthy. I think they're not legalistic, but they're healthy. But that shouldn't be our identity. That shouldn't be where we're sourced from. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and gentleness. That's another, gentleness and tenderness. It's hard. It's difficult to be to be sarcastic and to have those qualities. I mean, they're almost I don't know. One affects the appearance of the other, and I don't know. I know I'm probably bending over backwards with it, but I see so much sarcasm in the progressive, some of the progressive teachings, that it's just, I mean, who would want it? If I get through this deconstruction and all it is I'm just going to be able to nitpick and criticize and just point my finger at something and tear it down. I mean, that's not joy. That's not enjoyable.
Right.
So I love talking about Jesus. I mean, we all three do. And you could just tell. I mean, somebody watched one of our podcasts and talked to me the other day and just said, you guys are so happy. Yeah, uplifting. You guys are so uplifting, and you have such a good chemistry together because you all are so positive, and not positive in the sense of certainty, positive in the sense of having that, and I think it gets back to the energy source. The older I get, the more I see that our energy source shows. If our energy is coming from a negative, it shows. If it's coming from a positive, I mean,
back to fruit of the Spirit, right?
Yeah,
or the sunshine on the beach. I can see it in your face right now. Yeah. Sorry, I'm jealous.
Yeah. Well, I think that's very accurate. I mean, we go back to Scripture, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, when I think about Jesus and the Spirit of Christ, I mean, one and the same. It's a lightheartedness, right? Yeah. And even in, Jesus is carrying our burdens. His yoke is easy. His burden is light. And while the trials and, tribulations of the world, we talk about, even in the good, the joyous things that we experience, or the happy things, graduations, conventions with your kid, there can be elements of burden. I mean, I got frustrated by traffic down by, the stadium. Just like, I just want to get down here and have fun with my kids, and the kids are in the car, and I'm. So that said, I think when we live from that place of Christ's Spirit, and we live from the source of joy, those burdens are lifted, and while we might have a moment of sinking under some heaviness, we can pop back up real quick, right? And we did. You just pop back up. You might get heavy for a minute, or you might get frustrated for a second. You don't live there. And that's you're reminded, you're reminded, back to your identity in Christ, and that His burdens really are light, and you forgive. That's literally that point of that word, right? We forgive that moment. It's not just a person. You let it go.
Is it possible that in this journey, many have forgotten that it's about Jesus and our identity? and not
Oh, yeah.
the new theology or bad theology or the newest thing or, hey, look at that. But really, who is Christ in us?
That's
Because
right.
if we lose sight of that, what are we looking at? Well, we're not looking at Jesus. And then we have a rabbit trails. We become negative and the patterns change. Like you were saying earlier about going under the water, you can see the patterns in people's lives and how they speak. You know, if they're a positive person, negative person, you know, when they're having just a temporary rough time and authentically need encouragement. But if their whole life is a crab fest, always chewing out people, all really short, you got to dance around them and to, being careful, eggshells around them. That's a pattern, not their identity. And they're living from some fabrication. I just had somebody just recently say, this deconstruction stuff, yeah, it's okay, it's good, but I'm more excited about working on this reconstruction, the rediscovery, or the perspective of growth. That's what I'm excited about. And I remember taking a course on deconstruction that was really good. Content's amazing, but I was excited about the rebuild, about exploring the better news, not continually hounding what's wrong, because that can turn you quite negative and lose your joy in that. And that's what I don't want. It's just a big topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Bill's use of the word buoyancy. Well, he didn't exactly say buoyancy, but the language you were using was.
I got that. Buoyancy. I got it right here. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, but the concept, I love the word ebullience, but it basically means the same thing, that you bounce up. You're lighthearted, but you're also, because you have the spirit in you, or the breath, you bob up to the because of that.
Okay, that's a good illustration. Yep.
Yeah, and that we just rise above. There's so many, instances in Scripture, that talk about seeking things that are above, rise above, ascend. An ascending movement. And I know that some of the mystics have talked about, well, there's descending movements and then there's ascending movements, but every descending movement is to lead us ultimately to a greater and greater ascending movement, which is what deconstruction is a good example of that. Descending movement for a season, but that's underwater. We can't breathe. Yes, we can't breathe in deconstruction. We can't breathe there permanently. We have to bob back up if these things are pulling us down under the water. That's why we get into deconstruction. We find out why the anchor is around why the anchor is around our ankles and what's been dragging us down. And religion, nothing will desiccate you, pull you down, tie you down, drag you down more than empty religion that doesn't have any real life energy in it. And one of the greatest deliverances I know that I ever got from the Lord is I got settled on the point that He wants me to have a happy life. His will for my life is that I be happy. Even martyrs have happy lives, because they've tuned into where their happiness in the Lord. It doesn't really matter what we do. What matters is that attitude, that beatitude, of happiness. And once we're there, once we're there, then we can rest in that. I know in my apartment here, I'm 2 years out from a divorce, just to be completely honest, here. I'm 2 years out from the divorce, and I've had a lot of religious stuff try to come in and, put unhappiness on me, or try to make me think unhappy, or kind of wonder where I'm at, or the old religious, after a very, very long marriage, and obviously all sorts of teachings about it, hearing all this, thinking the hammer's going to fall, because of this. But what I found is that Jesus lives here in my apartment with me, and I've had such a peace. And it's like, I'm not saying He's happy about everything that's happened, or he's winking at me, because of it or anything, but I know that He's in my corner, just as he's in, in my ex-wife's corner. He's in both our corners.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you. Because those in pain tend to go us versus them, and Jesus in my court. And I thought that was brilliant what you just said.
Well, and she and I, it was a rough, the divorce was rough, but we're in a good place now, and we're friends again, and we're and we're both moving on, and we're both moving on into healing, and still, we're still staying family members, even though we're not spouses. We've sort of acknowledged each other as a family member. So, but anyway, all that having been said, I found out that the happiness that I thought I had before it wasn't happiness. It was largely conditional. It was largely performance based. It was largely just a whole bunch of religious junk and I was dying. I was underwater. And, and sometimes when we deconstruct, for whatever reason, we deconstruct a marriage, we deconstruct a job, we deconstruct a fellowship or whatever, that we get through it to the other side. But the most comforting thing of all is that Jesus is with all of us, and we're not going to drive him away. It is impossible to drive his presence, his comfort away. And once we get back to a place of where our head's above the water and we're breathing again, and we're confident and we're floating and we're buoyant, then then it just makes us love him all the more and find happiness. I know beyond all doubt he wants all of us happy. He wants that for us. He's not begrudging anything.
Got a question about that. Because I can hear people thinking, I just do. Can you explain your lens, and Bill, you too, the difference between happiness and joy? Because I think the terms are being intermingled and confusing, because I see more joy in you rather than happiness. Happiness is
there can be both, right?
It can, yes. But I see happiness more of a fruit of happenings, where joy is something of the spirit. There's a contentment, a place that happiness is a result of the joy. I don't know. Or tell me, like, I'm curious, because this is your lens. I'm curious. I just don't want anybody to think, well, it's all about my happiness, and that's, you know what I mean? That really airy fairy happiness thing.
Okay. Well, I just personally, I would look at happiness as more contentment.
Okay.
It's a state of contentedness, to where I'm not striving. I'm not looking to the next field, perpetually looking to the greener field, and never satisfied where I'm at. And whereas joy would be a particular, explosive sensation of not just contentedness, but of ecstasy, of some ecstasy. And of course, we can't live, 24/7 in that ecstatic state, although I imagine that there are different, gradations of it. There's different intensities of it. But and maybe I would say, for me, happiness would be sort of a combination of peace and contentedness and joy, maybe all three of those together. But I mean, at different ratios, I suppose, from time to time.
Do you see why I asked the question?
Yeah, and I think my filter is slightly different. Not that there's anything wrong, because we're dealing with words, and words are malleable, and words aren't. If we try to concrete down words, then we're just going to get into an argument. And we're actually aligned. It's just how we express it, right?
Yeah.
For me, happiness is kind of the moment. Like, I can be watching a football game and my team's winning, and I am ecstatically happy. I am happy. It's an emotional high.
Because it's so rare.
Yeah, exactly. Conversely, my team can be losing, and I can be just a schmarmy jerk, and I'm upset, and yet I'm still joyful. I'm at a game. I'm outside. I'm with my buddies. I'm maybe drinking an ice cold beer. I had chicken wings for lunch. There's not a lot I have to complain about, except just the emotion of the experience. And even though my emotions may be frustrated on the surface level, they're still sourced by an element of joy. And then, within 15, 20 minutes, I let that game go. I focus on the next opportunity at hand, and we hope for tomorrow, right? And joy is kind of the undergirding spirit by which all of it's measured. And whether I'm high or low in any given moment, I'm happy or angry or frustrated or sad or grieving or, any of these things. In love, joy is still consistent. It's my contentment. And so, again, that's just how I would articulate it.
So there's that word again. There's something about contentment in both of your statements.
Absolutely.
That I think it's a root or one of the key ingredients in experiencing both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think all unhappiness comes from discontentment. I mean, when you look at it that way,
missed expectation. Anger comes from anger or frustration, depending on how you want to. Comes from missed expectations.
Failed.
So when we have an expectation, I want to be there in 15 minutes, and there's an accident that I had no control over, or there's somebody did something idiotic, and now it's holding me up. I get frustrated. I get, And
Yeah, I think I think the last time we met, I think I talked about how the Lord is using rage. It is my metaphor. It is my.
it is such a good one.
It explains anger, impatience, everything else, and just applying the principles we so easily learn on the road to just relational road rage, or theological road rage, or social media road rage, or family road rage. It's because when we get down to it, it's because I'm not getting what I want in the moment, and when when that happens, I get discontent, I get unjoyful, and then you're angry, and then anger comes in and takes the place of contentedness.
I remember one time Christina and I drove all the way, I think, from Atlanta to Chicago one time. And we were going up there. I had some work thing, but I was going to parlay it into a football game. It was just the two of us. We put the music on, and I'm sure we hit traffic patches. I mean, we had, we went through Louisville and stuff. I don't think we had one discontented moment, because we were living in just the relational presence of one another for this long drive. We didn't have anywhere to be at a certain time. Our hotel room was reserved. It was one of the most joyful, happy drives. And yet I know we had moments of chaos that here in Atlanta, if I just had to be at a meeting, would have drove me up a wall. And it just comes from sometimes where we are, again, sourced from in the moment really is what that fruit blossoms, right? And I think sometimes it's a self-reflective thing. I mean, I think the emotions, happiness and anger, are good indicators of where we're being sourced from. And we can, sometimes it helps remind us, right, to go back to that other place, go up and get that breath of air, kind of as the metaphor we kept using, right? Let's go get some buoyancy and pop back up and recalibrate this whole thing. And sometimes these things last for days. Sometimes they last for months for people. Sometimes so if you're out there and you're just struggling that you've never experienced that, the only advice I can give is to really just kind of read about Jesus and take the Gospels into account and kind of study how he did this first. His life, and read between the lines. I know that's going to sound weird. I mean, read between the lines of his relationship with his disciples. These are young guys, and they're hanging around like fishermen and tax collectors, and they're sitting around a campfire at night. And there's things happening between these stories that are bonding these men together in a way that at least the three of us, I think, can relate to individually with our own little relationship, but even with other relationships. I think women can relate to it in their own ways too, right? In their own good interpersonal friendships. And what was happening there is there was this joy that was driving these men led by Jesus to some outcome. And then there's a twist at the end, right? And despite that twist, there's still joy taking place, especially in the personal perspective of Christ. Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's crying and just in utter agony. Can keep reading the story to find out there's still joy pushing, driving. There's hope. There's something beyond that moment that is wooing them into a perspective beyond the moment at hand. And I think you have to establish that for your own life, and you have to find that thing out there. For me, it's Jesus. It just is. It's the person of Jesus, and it's wooing me beyond my circumstances, and that breeds contentment.
Mm-hmm.
I would add one element to this, and I'm not saying this is always there, but I've noticed that, I used to would be good maybe for, if I'm talking to a particular individual, even about the Lord, I'm good for an hour. I may be good for 2 hours, but then at some point I start getting tired and kind of be thinking, looking at my watch and looking on. And what I've noticed is that when I'm really walking in happiness and contentment and joy, all that what we've been talking about, it's, this isn't one thing. It's a weave of many things. Jesus had that coat that was, without, not seamless. He had that seamless coat. And I think a lot of this is seamless. But I realize one big quality of it is how we relate to time.
Absolutely.
Time can be a tyrant. And time can come in and make us tired, make us think we're tired, make us think we ought to be tired. and get us out of the now and thinking on what the next thing is, the next thing, or the thing later in the day, or the greener field syndrome. Whereas, I mean, I had a conversation with somebody I'd never met before, maybe a month and a half ago. It lasted 6 hours and it blew past. The time blew past. I wasn't even aware of it. And I was energized at the end of the conversation. And I've had other conversations recently with the same way. And I don't know what's happening, but one aspect of it is I lose scope of time. I've somehow just said I don't care about time anymore. And I know, and we've talked about this, but there's two terms for time. There's chronos and there's kairos. And chronos is the linear time, where one thing follows another. That's the
chronological. Yeah. Yep.
That's the linear time that we keep, and that can become our master, if we let it. But then the other time is the Lord's time, and that's kairos. That's kairos time. And kairos time is how the Lord evaluates when he looks at it. He doesn't look at his watch. He's not looking at his watch. We're used to looking at our watch. The Lord looks at relational events. He looks at the quality of events, and those are the things that passes. So when he looks at it, he looks at where your relationship is. It's always a relational thing. And it's staggering, really, when we start looking at it from that point of view. We prioritize more than anything else. We prioritize the quality of our interactions. The quality.
I'm looking at the time, not to rush you, but to add one more thing, because I know we're probably getting short.
Okay. Go ahead.
But I think it was Andre Rabe. If you're not familiar with him, he's got some great stuff. But just time itself, if we think about it, all time is a measure of relationship. That's all it is. It's a measure of relationship between two objects. It's just a different way. We think about distance, we think about other things, but time is just a different way of measuring the relationship between two objects. And then when you think about time that way and not as some linear progressive thing that we have to manage, it can totally change your perspective. And I think that's what you're saying, Richard, is, we can even shift our perspective on time, that it's not seconds, because even Einstein proved it's relative. And when you're in that state of ecstasy, seconds become hours. And I think that brings some context to even how we're going to, experience eternity to some degree. I don't think eternity is nearly as progressively linear as we think. That it's much more relationally involved, even with the current linear time we have. I know I got some weird views on that, but that we're going to experience and re-experience new things, but also things of the past from totally new relational perspectives. And it's going to be glorious when we get to that place that we kind of click and start to understand time relationally, not linearly.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing to that is that when we're fully present, what I've noticed, the reason that I get into this linear trap is because I'm withholding something from me right now. I'm thinking about something in the future, and it's keeping me from being fully present in the now. And practicing being fully present, which is, of course, what the mystics all talk about, practicing the presence of God. It's just our being present in the moment. And it's not an effort-based thing, but it is something that we yield to the Lord, with. And when we do, the moments are full, the relationship is full, and we don't have that sense of passage of time. And it's just, and then we go back, man, that was a real event. That was really blessed. I'm
of the opinion, however you interpret it, and it's a different conversation, different day, but even the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve consumed this idea of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, their eyes became awakened to death, right? They knew about death, and death is the ultimate anticipated event, right? It's the same thing. They're thinking about the thing to come.
Yes.
And whether that's the death of traffic getting in your way or anything, it's the same fallen identity, right? It's the same distracted identity that death is the thing that's next, and you're not worried about what is. It's interesting because most animals don't have that. And we're unique in that ability to anticipate, to look. And it makes us very, very strong creatures on certain levels. But there's a weakness to it too, a humility to it too, right? And that's what we have to recognize, that we are susceptible to that. And you're going to screw it up. every single day. I'm going to screw it up, man. These two guys, and we call that sin. We call that missing the mark. We call that whatever. And it's normal. And it's forgiven already. And even when you do it, inevitably, it doesn't change the fact that the relationship that's coming, from above the water, where we go get our breath, is never going to not be there.
Yes. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's wrap up, because I think this topic of joy, but even just catching up with you guys, and if I can say it in a weird way, but there's joy to me that I get from hearing the goodness of what's happening in your lives, because we stopped to take time to experience connection. And if we rush connection and overrun the base with assumptions, which I did recently with somebody, it's like crap, because I misinterpreted something and they were offended, and then I realized, oh crap, that's not what I meant, and then I reached out and there was grace given back to me. I was like, wait, that's amazing. I'm used to giving it to others. Somebody gave it to me. That's so cool, and a whole new respect grew and gave me joy. So maybe there's a lot more to this in the relationship context.
Well, what we ought to do sometime is do a show on Martin Buber's book, I and Thou. That's one of the biggest books of the last century. And Christians loved it. He was a Hasidic Jew, and it was very close dialogue with Christians. But he wrote this little book in German, and it's not easy to read. But I found other people who were passionate understanders of him, and I said, "That's what he's saying." Oh dear Lord, it's wonderful. But his whole thing is about it's God didn't give. For instance, God didn't give a woman to Adam. God gave a relationship with a woman to Adam. What he gives us, everything that he gives us is a relationship. Yeah. And because we tend to
not a thing to be owned.
Yeah. The realm of the between, he said, all great things happen in the relation between. But to enter the realm of the between, you have to drop your agenda. You have to enter the realm and be willing to change, be willing for it to take you someplace. And that's scary. But anyway, that's the thing for another day. But I mean, it's totally changed my whole orientation on stuff. Everything is relational, like Bill said. With time, even time itself. When you see everything is relational, it changes everything.
Yeah, you've mentioned that book before a number of times in the last couple of years. So maybe we should look into that, but not this summer, because we're going to kind of go relax this summer somehow. But thank you again, guys, for this time. And folks, we'll look forward to the next conversation. Thanks for joining us. See ya. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. That was good. We tend to go into different directions as we go, even though we may have a topic. But I hope you were encouraged by that. There's some pretty practical things there that we can take away. I hope you enjoyed the discussion today. I look forward to taking the next couple weeks off. If I do pop in, it'll be a surprise. Maybe while I'm traveling, I might jump in and say hello a few times, but we'll see. I'm taking a much needed vacation and I can hardly wait. All right. Well, it's been a joy being with you, and it's a joy doing these programs every week. And I hope that after a breath of fresh air, even more inspiring and joyful content will come your way that will encourage you and lift you up. And if you enjoy these, share them with others. Otherwise, other people can't hear it. I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll catch you next time. Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.